Leveling endlessly with the strongest system. Chapter 41, Mighty Dungeon Boss. Open hollow corner bracket. You have entered the Gremlin's Grotto. Close hollow corner bracket. Roy was teleported to the second testing ground after jumping into the golden portal. He looked around and found that he was in a stone corridor and in close proximity to a group of monsters. This invader's sudden appearance didn't miss their attention. They immediately tried to take out this invader. The goblin shaman pointed its staff at him and chanted a few demonic words. Whiz! Immediately, the corridor heated up as a fireball shot toward him. It roared cheerfully, believing that it would take him out instantly with this attack. Oh no, you aren't. Roy summoned his sword from the subspace and slashed it downwards. The fireball was slashed in two. Its two pieces shot past him, exploring a few steps behind him. He jumped ahead, straight to his enemies, to escape the range of the explosion. As he headed for the goblin shaman's head, the cursed warrior moved in. It was a monster that barely resembled a goblin. It did have green skin, but it was awfully skinny and a head taller than Roy. Its battle club smashed towards him. To dodge it, Roy had to jump back, creating a distance between him and the shaman. This was the moment the goblin assassin had been waiting for. It stepped out of the darkness, and the dagger in its hands stabbed toward Roy's back. Clang! It had missed its mark. Roy had blocked the dagger with his sword. The one holding the dagger was so shocked that its eyes opened wide to the size of saucers. How did he block this deadly and silent attack? Your breathing was too loud, dumbass. Roy slashed out with his sword. If I had missed it, I wouldn't be worthy of being at the mythical level of body tempering. The sword sliced into its neck. The goblin assassin was beheaded. Its head dropped to the ground as another fireball shot toward Roy. He grabbed the headless goblin, throwing it towards the fireball. Boom! The fireball came in contact with the corpse of the goblin and exploded. It was scorched to the point of perfection. A cloud of dust raised. And the smell of burned meat filled the air as Roy rushed out of the smoke and pounced on the cursed warrior, bringing his sword down at it. Gika, shocked to see that it was being surprised attacked, it hurriedly raised its club to meet his sword. Roy was many times stronger than it. His sword cut its club into two pieces and went down. Reflected in its eyes was a sword too bright. That was the last thing it saw before Roy's sword went down from the top of its head to the bottom of its neck. Brain matter and blood gushed out, splashing behind Roy. He had already pounced on the last monster. Guhu, seeing him coming immensely close, it cast an instant spell. A weak fireball shot out of its staff, aiming for Roy's face. Second soul spell activate. Roy activated the second of his two soul spells. He didn't only gain a subspace, but also a mana wall soul spell after his shadow had devoured Ninim's ring of magic. A shield immediately manifested before him. He grabbed it and swung it forward. The fireball was smashed with it. An explosion sounded like before. This time, as only the goblin shaman was left, Roy appeared before it. Geek! His narrowed eyes scared it immensely. It stumbled back in fear, but Roy could hear it mumbling out a magic spell. What a sneaky bastard. It was putting up a false display of fear to hide what it was actually doing. Die! Roy roared as he stabbed down with his sword. Before it could complete its life-saving spell, it was killed. Open hollow corner bracket. You have killed 3 LVL 9 servants of Gremlin. You gained 180 experience points. Close hollow corner bracket. Open hollow corner bracket. You get Staff of Magic. It has the property of increasing fire damage by 10%. Close hollow corner bracket. It wasn't useful for him, but he picked it up and stowed it away. Open hollow corner bracket. You get Rune Stone of Assassination. It has the property of invisibility. Its beholder can become invisible using it. Close hollow corner bracket. This was his second rune stone from this dungeon. Honestly, he wouldn't feel bad if he didn't find a treasure chest in this dungeon. What he had looted so far was enough to make other people's eyes red. He moved ahead. There were 5 more corridors in this place. The entrance of each was guarded by the same obstacles Roy had just faced. There were differences in their number, level, and ability, but the kind of monsters they were and the fact that they were weaker than Roy remained the same. Open hollow corner bracket plus 280 XP, close hollow corner bracket. Open hollow corner bracket plus 360 XP, close hollow corner bracket. Open hollow corner bracket plus 220 XP, close hollow corner bracket. Roy blasted the obstacles of the 5 corridors apart, forcing his way to the depth of the second testing ground. There he came across staircases that led up to a magnificent golden gate. I have finally found it, the entrance to the boss room. This was the boss's gate. He went up to it and saw 5 symbols. Each was lit up, signifying that killing the monsters in the corridors hadn't been a waste of time for Roy. If he hadn't killed them, the magic lock sealing the door would have never been undone. He placed his hands on it and gave it a gentle push. Creak tilde. Immediately, the door opened with a creepy sound, and he walked inside. The boss room was as dark as the night Roy was born. Woof. The moment he walked inside, a heaven-shaking roar sounded, tingling his ears. The lamps attached to the walls lit up. Darkness receded to his corners and the place brightened up. Then, a beast that resembled a gremlin and was no less than 5 meters tall came into his vision. Oye fucker, were you raised by streets dogs? Don't you know it's not good to bark at just anyone? Roy lashed out at it as he cleaned his ear with his pinker. The reply he got was, woof, woof. And then the boss monster charged at him. Leveling endlessly with the strongest system. Chapter 42, Darklan, the Gremlin. This was a giant gremlin. It was level 15, 2 levels above Roy. The worst part was that it was a boss-type vicious monster. The good news was that because it was too big, fat, and burly, it was slower than Roy. Roy stood still, watching the monster approach him. The subspace opened and closed in his closed palm. Left in it was a rune stone. His aura poured into it, activating it. A white light shot out of it, enveloping his entire body. Instantaneously, his skin hardened. Open hollow corner bracket. You've used the fortification rune stone to increase your defense. Your skin has become a shield that will protect you from harmful elements. Close hollow corner bracket. By the time his skin became as strong as his bones, the giant gremlin was 16 feet away from him. Woof, it pounced on Roy. In midair, its hand grew to the size of a door, and its nails increased in length to look like a 1-meter blade. Its gigantic claws lashed out toward the invader. Seeing this, the heart of Roy did a somersault. This isn't something I can block with my sword, Roy thought. His muscles puffed up and veins popped up on his visible neck as he jumped to the side with all his strength to escape the reach of its claw. The monster's huge claw smashed to the ground. As a result, a cloud of dust rose up into the air. Roy, who was rolling on the ground, was enveloped and blinded by it after he saw the giant gremlin's hand returning to its original form and its tail enlarging to the size of the pillars in this room. Whoosh! A ferocious wind swatted the dust in the air, revealing to Roy's eyes a spiky tail whipping towards him. He jumped, and the monster's tail went to the right from beneath him. The next moment, his feet touched the ground, and he sprinted towards the gremlin. Its tail shortened to its original size and its claw underwent gigantification as he reached him. This gremlin had a big body but tiny limbs and tail. It could somehow enlarge every part of its body, but only one at a time. Whoosh! The boss clawed at him again. By jumping over it, Roy dodged it. He stepped on its large arm and sprinted upwards. The giant gremlin's eyes widened in shock as it saw what Roy was doing. It lifted its hand and gave it a furious shake, trying to throw Roy off. It was already too late, however. He jumped off its arm and reached towards the place he was aiming for. Pain can make grown men cry. Experience it yourself. Roy smiled as he shouted that and thrust his sword into its eyes. The gremlin's eyes thinned to the size of needles. Then, immense pain filled its poor little vicious soul. Open hollow corner bracket. You stabbed your sword in the giant gremlin's eye. It lost 80 HP, 425 hundredths. It has become blind in one eye. Close hollow corner bracket. GWOOHHHH. It cried and roared and gasped for air like a fish out of water and brought down its gigantic claw towards the bug on its face. Roy jumped away with his sword so as not to get squashed by its claw. Pa! The scene of a monster slapping itself played as Roy landed on the ground and furiously whipped his sword about, slashed open severe wounds on its legs. Open hollow corner bracket. The giant gremlin slapped itself. It lost 40 HP, 385 hundredths, close hollow corner bracket. Open hollow corner bracket. The giant gremlin was hit by 6 of your ferocious attack. It lost 60 HP, 325 hundredths, close hollow corner bracket. 6 of his attacks connected. The 7th was about when the giant gremlin swatted his sword away with its tail. Roy went along with it. His dumpling-like body did a flip in mid-air, landing on the ground on 2 feet gracefully. At that very moment, he felt a terrifying fluctuation in the surrounding mana. He looked up and saw the boss monster's claw shining brightly. It was brought down. Swoosh. A mighty in the shape of a claw manifested in the air and shot towards Roy. He flew to the left side like a bird leaving its nest. And, as expected, he dodged it. The pillar behind wasn't as lucky. It was chopped apart like a piece of paper. Roy saw that from the corner of his eyes, realizing that dodging it was the correct decision even though it had slowed him down. As he stood up after rolling, the massive beast's shadow draped over him. The previous attack made by the boss was all for this moment. Its claw fell down on him like an unstoppable force. Ah, I fucked up. At this instance, Roy realized that. He raised his sword to block its claw. The claw smashed on his sword, causing his knees to bend and the ground below his feet to shatter. But he didn't fall. Right then, he felt something tightening around his ankle. After which, its tail picked him up. Then, he was blasted into a wall. He fell down with blood coming out of his nose and mouth. Open hollow corner bracket. Your fortified skin has blocked most of the damage. You lost 3 HP, 7/10 hydrogen phosphide, close hollow corner bracket. Fuck, this boss monster is on an entirely different level than the ones I've faced. Although coughing out blood. Roy stood up in a hurry because the monster, like a mad bull, intended to headbutt him to death. Its intention was foiled by Roy at the very last moment. On top of that, Roy gave it a taste of its own medicine. He jumped away at the last second, causing the boss monster to run into the wall. It wanted to stop but was too late to pull back. The scene of a giant gremlin kissing the wall played. Open hollow corner bracket. The giant gremlin smashed its head on the wall. It lost 30 HP, 295 hundredths hydrogen phosphide, close hollow corner bracket. This was the second time Roy had made a fool out of it. He had basically enraged it so much that it was willing to use its ultimate to end him. The giant gremlin pushed itself out of the wall, sniffed the air to find where he was, and turned to him. Then, without a word, it opened its mouth. Forming in the center of it was a giant body of ice. The expression on its face was of utmost confidence. Undoubtedly, what was coming would put Roy to sleep for eternity. This bastard, you aren't the only one with flashy moves, Roy said as he raised the sword. It brightened up. The gremlin's wish was to see the moon once last time before it died. It was from the west of the Great Forest, but was picked up by a ridiculously strong mage and thrown here to guard this room. Its wish was fulfilled when the moonlight coalesced on the surface of reflection, Roy's sword. At this moment, it became the very definition of resplendence. Right then, a sound sounding similar to an explosion rang out. The giant body of ice shot out of its mouth. It was a huge iceberg covered in bone-chilling spikes. "Unleash your might, reflection," Roy shouted and brought his sword down. At that very instant, the moonlight gathered on it, scattered like butterflies flying away. Under the watchful eyes of Roy and the giant gremlin, silvery arcs shaped like a crescent moon met the iceberg in midair, creating a loud bang. Who came out on top? Leveling endlessly with the strongest system. Chapter 43, Yama's dagger. Bang! The silvery flying sword arcs burst apart the icebergs into hundreds of pieces and rained down on the giant gremlin. It was so slow that it couldn't move out of their way in time and had to take them head-on. One after another, they rained down on it like torrential rain. Swish. 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 The giant claw it had raised to block them was what they chopped off before drawing dozens of red lines all over its body. These lines grew, and blood gushed out, splashing on the ground. Open hollow corner bracket. You've landed consecutive critical hits on the giant gremlin. It lost 270 HP, 2500 hydrogen phosphide. It's periodically receiving bleeding damage. It will lose 1 HP every minute, close hollow corner bracket. Roy saw it was covered in wounds from head to toe and thought to himself, is this the power of a magic sword? Too ridiculous. The giant gremlin was no longer Roy's match. It was not only at its last breath and covered in injuries, but its legs and thighs were so injured that it could not move, and its arms were in similar conditions, so it couldn't attack using them either. The only thing it could use to attack was its tail, but Roy easily dodged it and finished it off by beheading it. Its head fell down to the ground, and immediately a notification sounded in Roy's mind. Open hollow corner bracket. You've killed Darklan, the giant gremlin. You gained 150 experience points. You gained 750 additional express for killing a monster 5 levels higher than you. You gained 100 bonus express for killing a level 15 monster for the first time, close hollow corner bracket. The rewards amazed him. He couldn't store this big boss's corpse in his subspace. So he dissected it using his dissection skill. Methodically, he skinned it, separating the useful parts of its body from the useless parts. He did it too fast. Unless one has a glorious history of dismembering monsters for their parts, they will come nowhere close to Roy. Open hollow corner bracket. Ding. Congratulations. You looted sturdy bones, sharp claws, delicious tail, and a magical beast core from the giant gremlin's corpse. Merchants would be happy to buy them, close hollow corner bracket. Open hollow corner bracket. Ding. Congratulations. You looted the rune stone of magic complexity, the rune stone of gigantification, and the windblade rune stone from the giant gremlin's corpse, close hollow corner bracket. No wonder it was so strong. It had 3 rune stones. Now, however, they were all Roy's. The hard work he had put into killing it paid off the moment he got his hand on the colorful stones. The second and third rune stones were self-explanatory. He inspected the first one, finding out about its functions. Open hollow corner bracket. You've used inspect on the rune stone of magic complexity, close hollow corner bracket. Open hollow corner bracket. 4 magic symbols can be placed anywhere in your field of vision. After placing them, you can't change their location or take them back within an hour. They can't be seen by the naked eye. Each symbol reflects a different ability, from sealing to ability reuse. If someone steps on a symbol, its effect will be instantly activated, close hollow corner bracket. He found it complex but also fun. The thing was that it added an element of uncertainty to every battle. he could use it just like the fortification rune stone he had received from the Boneworm area boss. Just by pouring his aura into it, he would be able to activate its special effect. The problem with this way was that it ate away at the lifespan of the rune stone. The best example was the white fortification rune stone. It was now only 2/3 road its original size, as Roy had used its effect in an unnatural way once. Except for his sword, everything precious went inside his subspace. He stood up, looking for a way out. Exists would be generated in a naturally formed dungeon after the boss monster gets defeated. But this was a trial ground. He had to find the exit himself. But one thing was certain. The exit had to be in this room. As Roy was searching for the exit, a ray of light flashed, and a sharp dagger was seen shooting for his life. Just as it was about to claim it, Roy whipped around and deflected it with his sword. The dagger landed on the ground with dull thuds. Looking at it, Roy gulped, his hands shaking. If not for the fact that he has the sixth sense that monks of his previous life dreamt of having and, thanks to it, sensed the approaching danger, this dagger would have claimed his life, no doubt about it. Who shot it through? Reveal yourself, Roy shouted mightily while keeping his eyes on the entrance to the boss room. Clap. This sound echoed 6 times as a person walked into the boss room. Roy finally had a good look at the person who tried to assassinate him. This unknown person's eyes were like that of a seductive fox. His lips and nose were like that of a pure maiden, tiny but pleasant to look at, and his hair was black and shiny, falling down to his waist like a waterfall. Roy would have mistaken this man for a gorgeous woman if his Adam's apple, strong and thick muscles, and sharp jawline didn't stand out. As a whole, this man was the perfect combination of the masculine and the feminine. This man was wearing an all-black ninja suit. Droplets of sweat continuously ran down his temple. The mask he was supposed to use to cover his face was dangling from his neck. Evidently, this man had traveled a long way in a short time to get here to assassinate Roy. People say that the third son of Count Badolf is a useless waste and can't hold his own against a gust of wind. From what I have seen, the rumors outside are fake. You aren't a useless waste. You're far more impressive than your peers. Intelligent enough to fool the world. And stronger than the 7th prince who hadn't undergone awakening. You're at least at the 10th level of the body refinement stage. Am I wrong? The assassin said that while leaning against the wall and trying to act cool when in actuality, he was just catching his breath. Yes, you're wrong, Roy replied. The truth was this man was indeed wrong. Roy wasn't in the 10th level but at the 13th level. Swift Death was dumbfounded at his words. Huh. I judged you wrong. If you're not at the 10th level, what stage are you in? Roy ignored his question as he didn't feel the need to make himself clear to this asshole and, in turn, questioned him with a red face. Who are you? Swift Death, without a change in his emotions, replied, what good would knowing that do for you? Hearing what he said, Roy rolled his eyes. Why did you try to assassinate me? Roy questioned the madman again. What other reasons could I have? Someone's paying a lot for your head, and I just happen to be the one trying to claim it. After saying that, Swift Death straightened his posture. The laziness in his eyes vanished, and a sharp aura exuded from him. He started walking toward Roy. The more the distance between them lessened, the more he looked like an assassin that was out on a hunt. Who wants me dead? Roy asked. Swift Death's eyebrow raised. You don't know. Roy looked back at him in silence. This silence was taken as an answer by Swift Death. Leveling endlessly with the strongest system. Chapter 44, Roy vs. Swift Death. Roy's expression told Swift Death all he needed to know. The assassin stopped and narrowed his eyes at him. It's a surprise to know someone as intelligent as you don't know who wants you dead. You managed to fool the world into believing you're not worth a cent when actually you're the best among the unawakened. The fact that you tackled 2 trial grounds alone and succeeded in triumphing over them proves it. I don't know why you hid yourself so deeply, but you must have your reason, just like I had for becoming an assassin. The assassin was silent for a while. Ah, well, now that I think about it, it's not too surprising you don't know. Actually, you don't have much of a beef with my client. You were just in their way. So they want you out. How about this? I'll tell you who they are if you beat me. With a smile, Roy gladly accepted his challenge. All right, bring it on. The minute his last word was spoken, the feminine youth charged toward him. There was a reasonable distance between the two. He wouldn't instantly reach him. This was the perfect time to determine this man's power level and specialties. Roy inspected him. At that very moment, the black bracelet on the youth's wrist released a shine. It was barely visible, but it didn't escape Roy's notice. On the other hand, a blue screen appeared before him. Only 3 words were shown before it crumbled apart into pieces. Then, another system's notification rang in his mind. Open hollow corner bracket ding. Your target's family regalia has nullified the effect of your skill. Inspect failed, close hollow corner bracket. Roy was taken aback by this. This was the second person on which his information gauging skill had failed. He must be really something. Like his name, swift death covered the distance between them swiftly. 2 daggers materialized out of nowhere in his hand. Roy, who saw this scene, determined that this guy was at least at the weapon master level. Although the opponent was a whole stage above him, he didn't panic. He had taken down a level 15 boss monster that was supposedly stronger than peak level weapon masters. He had no reason to fear this guy who had only shown the capability of a beginner-level weapon master. My name is Swift Death. You're about to experience why I am called that. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The assassin slashed his daggers at him several times in one breath, as if he was not familiar with the concept of taking a break. Roy dodged all his attacks by simply tilting his body out of the trajectory of his attacks, just like a martial expert. He did not even pull out the moon-reflecting sword. The assassin's eyes widened to the size of saucers as he was alarmed to see how easily Roy had dodged his combo move. How did you do that? How can you dodge my swift barrage with that body of yours? Swift Death asked after dodging Roy's sword by jumping backward. A distance was created between them. Roy smiled and replied, What do you mean how? You're just too slow and predictable. I can see your attacks coming for my vitals from a mile away. There was a ridiculous difference between their stats. The brief exchange there had helped Roy realize that. He had been fighting boss monsters all this time. Boss monsters' stats were ridiculously higher than all the trainees and most weapon masters. He was the only one whose stats were higher than level 10 boss monsters and around level 15 boss monsters. Others wouldn't come close. It's just that he hadn't realized it until this fight. Whoosh. Clang. Roy stabbed his sword toward the assassin's shoulder. Swift Death blocked it with his dagger, but his hand turned bead red as if it would explode. The impact he felt from blocking his sword was similar to a train smashing a man. They clashed several dozen times in a span of a minute. Roy's 69th attack went through Swift Death, who quickly burst apart like a balloon. He immediately realized that his sword had only connected with the assassin's afterimage. The real person was somewhere else. Then, where is he? Roy's sixth sense came into play at this moment. Firstly, he sensed great fluctuations in the surrounding mana just 2 steps behind him. Then, his hair stood on the edge. A prickling sensation stabbed the back of his head. Got you. Before those whispers reached Roy's ears, Swift Death hadn't only appeared in the spot where he had sensed energy fluctuations but also thrust the sharpness in his hand towards the back of his head. Roy bent his knees, his body dropping down as the dagger went over his head. The assassin swiftly followed up with a stab to his back with his other hand that forced Roy to roll forward. His body hadn't hit the ground when he launched a kick towards his butt. From the corner of his eyes, Roy saw a glimmer of steel flashing ominously on the tip of his boot. A knife was sticking out of it. If this kick of his were to connect with his butt, he wouldn't be able to fart or shit in peace. Pa! Roy slapped his hand on the ground with all the strength he could muster, shooting himself out of the trajectory of his insidious strike. This is where we say goodbye. The dagger in his hand shot out, flying towards Roy at the speed of an arrow. As he was in midair, he had no platform to change his trajectory or move out of the way of this dagger. It's impossible for you to dodge death this time around, Swift Death proudly exclaimed. However, his expression took a turn for the worst as he saw a smile creeping up on Roy's face. Mana wall. A mana wall appeared in the trajectory of the dagger. Almost at the same time, a mana shield appeared below him. Leveling endlessly with the strongest system. Chapter 45, Roy vs Swift Death, B. Open hollow corner bracket ding. Devil's Hand has lost the last charge of mana shield, close hollow corner bracket. Open hollow corner bracket ding. You lost 100 units of aura for activating the soul spell, mana shield. Charges unlimited, close hollow corner bracket. Bam! The shield was quickly destroyed by the dagger, but it did cause a delay to the dagger and slowed it down. This proved immensely helpful to Roy. He smashed his feet on the mana shield below him, using it as a platform to jump over the dagger and land on the ground elegantly like kung fu. At the ridiculousness of this situation, not only was Swift Death's jaw threatening to drop to the ground, but he also forgot to blink. I dodged death again, proving you wrong. What do you have to say about that? Roy tauntingly said to Swift Death. Swift Death scoffed, I've underestimated you. Able to use both magic and aura, you indeed carry the blood of the Baldwins. You hide plenty of remarkable tricks under your sleeves. I admit. But, you're mistaken about one thing. You'll run out of tricks sooner or later. I won't. I carry the burden of the soul shard of teleportation. Teleportation comes to me as naturally as breathing. I can attack you like this repeatedly. How many times can you summon those shields before you run out of mana? How many times can you dodge my unseen blade? At his words, Roy smirked and spoke. What if I say your hidden blades are visible to my eyes, that I don't even need my eyes to dodge them? Immediately, as if furious, Swift Death barked out. Bullshit. Unsurprisingly, Swift Death closed in on Roy in the blink of an eye, only to see a sword with a white surface inching closer and closer to his neck. What the heck? Swift Death's heart did a somersault. Just as the sword was about to find its mark, Swift Death teleported again. Roy sensed fluctuations in the energy present in nature just behind him and smiled. So, you have chosen to teleport behind me. What a foolish mistake. As expected, Swift Death appeared behind Roy. His ferocious eyes were showing all signs of getting rid of Roy. However, it hadn't even been a second since his arrival when a sword slapped him silly. He fell to the ground, landed on it, and then was stomped like an ant. Cough. He coughed out blood, his internal energy in a mess. He looked up, only to see Roy's smiling face. How did you determine it? Swift Death asked, unable to understand how he had determined the spot he would teleport to. Swift Death had annihilated a small clan of nobles merely months ago. It was made possible thanks to the soul shard of teleportation he had merged with. Yet, this was now proving to be ineffective against Roy. His teleportation skill that was super effective against an entire clan couldn't hold a candle against Roy. Roy had the sixth sense. The fluctuations of energy in his surroundings couldn't escape his notice. There would be a fluctuation in the surrounding mana each time Swift Death teleported. That was why he was able to determine where he was going to teleport before he even appeared. Let's see, Roy was reminded of the stunt this bastard had pulled on him. It was time to get back at him. What good would knowing that do for you? Swift Death coughed out a mouthful of blood because of the verbal and physical abuse he had taken from Roy. Roy felt not at all sympathetic toward this person. You lost. It's about time you. Not so fast. Swift Death teleported 100 meters away, escaping from beneath Roy's foot. Roy exhaled irritatedly and looked at Swift Death with a pouty face. Do you intend to repeat what just transpired? Their eyes met. No. This time would be different. This time I won't be holding anything back. Swift Death glared daggers at Roy. Roy felt a bad premonition in his heart, like something disastrous was going to happen. Swift Death's heart started beating so loudly that Roy could hear his heartbeat. Whatever he was planning to do was also self-harming. Blood gushed out of his eyes, nose, and ear. A hot, metallic scent raised up his throat. He gnashed his teeth, forcing down the blood in his mouth. Stop it, you idiot. You're killing yourself, Roy shouted at Swift Death. He was truly worried for him. If this bastard died, he would never know who exactly had gone so far as to hire an assassin to kill him. However, Swift Death ignored his call. I can't stop. We aren't irredeemable enemies. I haven't offended you. Yet you're putting your life on the line to kill me. Why the heck are you going so far? Only with you gone can my family survive. Tears appeared in the assassin's eyes. Whether it was because of pain or guilt, no one other than him knew. Forgive me, but you must die. A moment after he said that, rays of black light shot out of his chest and enveloped his dagger. The daggers left his hand, flying to a spot 6 inches above his death, where they started to multiply in numbers, going from 2 to 10 in a second in the shape of a Chinese fan. Even then, they didn't stop multiplying. Like a peacock spreading open its tail, fans made out knives manifested above Swift Death one after another. Roy shook his head, disappointed. It has come to this, huh? I guess, I have no choice but to. Roy's eyes closed, his breathing pattern, posture, and demeanor took a 180-degree turn, and he raised his sword above his head. Bang! A loud noise rang out from his body as waves of inner energy surged out of his inner world, and after traveling through his blood vessel, they charged into his sword. What is this? No way, it can't be aura. Swift Death could see a faint, dark aura gushing out of Roy's body and vanishing into his sword. This must be a joke, right? Only the aura of an aura master is visible. Not even a weapon master can give shape and color to their aura. I must be seeing things, Swift Death thought to make himself feel better. Still, he couldn't let go of the troubled feeling haunting him. Roy was up to something, and he definitely didn't want to find out what. Thus, he tried to end this fight immediately. I am a weapon master. The Class 1 awakened in the Dweller of the Night. My weapon name is Asura's Fan. Consider yourself lucky, for you're the third to witness its might since its birth. After saying that, Swift Death pushed his hand forward, and a massive stream made out of hundreds of knives shot toward Roy. Swoosh. This attack, even a peak weapon master might not take head-on. Ninim's third song, Roar of the Sword. As Roy said that in a gentle, barely audible whisper, he swung his sword down, and a wave of dark inner energy gushed out from its tip. In front of the stream of knives, it was like a speck of dust. Swift Death's eyes turned funny as if he had witnessed the greatest joke of his life and chuckled. This will be eaten away in an instant. Following that was a bout of confusion. Ha! The speck of inner energy magnified as it shot through the air, becoming bigger and bigger and transforming into a gigantic, black arc shaped like a crescent moon. From a mere speck, it grew to the size of a mountain and swallowed all the light in the room, allowing only darkness to remain. WHIRR. The long-awaited roar, the roar that disappeared 200 years, the roar that used to terrify the souls. It had returned to the far west. Leveling endlessly with the strongest system. Chapter 46, Truth Revealed. Clang. The flying energy sword slash smashed apart the mighty stream of knives, splitting it open and shooting through it to reach the assassin. The daggers that made up the sharp stream failed to hold their own against the domineering might of the roaring sword and flew out like broken kites before raining down on the ground. Dang, dang, dang. The next moment, dull thuds were produced. This scene flabbergasted Swift Death. Whoosh! He snapped back quickly as the flying sword could be seen cutting apart the air itself and coming down on him. As it reached for his head, the shadow of death fell upon him, stealing the view of the surrounding from his eyes. He gritted his teeth. I don't want to die. There are people waiting for me back home. If I fall here and now, how would they survive? Swift Death's eyes turned red. His teleportation wasn't working because he had fucked up his body with that last slot that was ridiculously destroyed by a slash of Roy's sword. Manifesting a power beyond his limits had injured him so severely that he wasn't able to display the power of the soul shard he had merged with. Work, work, one last time, please work. Death's hand reached an inch away from him as he desperately tried to make his power work. Just then, with a whooshing noise, he vanished from his spot. God did not hear his prayer, but, unknown to him and everyone else, someone, or rather something did. Roy was spent after using the third song of Ninum. Because of using it, his blood vessels were a mess. The pain he was feeling right now was no less than a person getting pricked by hundreds of needles. He intentionally trembled before falling to the ground like a withered leaf. He was certain the assassin had survived as he had received no notification about his death from the system, and he also believed that seeing his weak self, the assassin would launch an assassination for his life. Thus, he took out the rune stone of complexity and poured his aura into it. Only with this item would he subdue the assassin for good. Open hollow corner bracket. You have activated the rune stone of complexity, close hollow corner bracket. Open hollow corner bracket. Where would you like to put the 4 magic symbols, close hollow corner bracket. He didn't immediately place them down. He held on to them. I am spent. If that bastard managed to survive, things wouldn't end well for me. Intentionally, Roy shouted out that loud for the assassin to hear. As expected, a pair of ears belonging to a man 70 meters away twitched. The assassin's eyes narrowed. This is a God-sent opportunity. It's a waste to kill a talent like him, but nothing is more important to me than feeding and taking care of my family. His sacrifice will be remembered. Gold was needed to take care of young ones. And, he would get that only if he assassinated Roy and turned in his head. Poof. His body vanished into smoke, and he did a teleport. Roy felt the great changes in the surrounding mana. There was a massive energy fluctuation just behind him. His lips curled up into a smile. Put the auxiliary magic symbol, sealing chains, a step behind me. Open hollow corner bracket ding. The invisible magic symbol, sealing chains, has been set on the ground a step behind you. Anyone who steps on it would lose their mobility, and their aura or mana gate would be temporarily sealed, causing them to lose the access they have to their inner world and sea of mana, close hollow corner bracket. Like a deadly predator, Swift Death appeared behind Roy, silent. There was no tension on his face. It was a sign he was unaware that he had stepped on a trap carefully prepared by Roy just for him. Gotcha. Roy muttered under his breath as he remained seated. Swift Death raised his dagger and got ready to send him off. You were strong, ridiculous so. If it was some other bronze-grade assassin, they would have lost long ago. But it's your bad luck that you met me. If you've any last words, now's the time to say them. Having activated the trap, Roy knew that the assassin could no longer move, and hence, the assassin's words were taken as a joke. He couldn't help but laugh like a crazy maniac. PFFT. Have you gone mad? Swift Death said. Roy composed himself quickly and replied, is it innocence? Or is it ignorance? How can you dare say that to me after falling into my trap? Are you naive or just plain stupid? What trap? The assassin broke out in cold sweat. At first, he thought Roy had gone crazy, but when he tried to summon his class weapons, the black daggers, to slit his throat, he realized that not only could he not manifest them, but he could also not move. What did you do to me? While saying this, Swift Death struggled to break free from the invisible hand keeping him immobilized but failed. All his efforts were in vain. The more he struggled, the more he felt caged. Rose stood up and turned to the assassin, raising his sword and bringing it close to his vitals. You should be able to tell. So, let's skip that. And let's come straight to the point. Who is it? Who hired you? Swift Death felt a cold feeling on his neck. A sword rested there. A gentle push would cause the sword to end his life. It didn't take a mastermind to determine that he would be beheaded if he played any tricks or refused to give an answer to the man. Swift Death uttered 2 words. It's Rose. Roy's brow raised. There were thousands of people with this name. Surely, it couldn't be the one he knew. He didn't have much beef with her and was still to do things to anger her. There is no way she is the one behind this attempt at his life. Rose. Rose who? Swift Death was worried that this madman would truly kill him, so he swiftly exposed the full name of his cliente. The young miss of the Charlotte family, Rose Charlotte. Leveling endlessly with the strongest system. Chapter 47, The Assassin is a nanny. Roy pulled his sword away from Swift Death after getting what he wanted. The assassin breathed out in relief, but wariness was still present in his eyes. Oh, I see. A thoughtful look appeared on Roy's face as he said that. Roy had made the mistake of judging the people of this world with the mentality of an earthling. Rose was much worse than the average, for she treated people as either useful tools or useless waste. Her official fiancé was of the most troublesome second type. She wanted to marry the son of Acles, but she was officially engaged to him, meaning he, a useless waste, could kick up a fuss at her wedding, ruining her love life with her love and glorious future as the daughter-in-law of the Acles. There were only 2 ways for this engagement to be officially dissolved. The first was, of course, both parties signing the dissolution of the betrothed contract, which was still to happen. The impatient lass thus chose the second method, which was to take out Roy from her life. Once he was dead, this engagement would be automatically officially annulled, no question asked. And she would get together with her lover without a hic. There was no problem with this plan of her. She had seen how much the Count hated this son of his. Even if he died, she wouldn't be held responsible. At most, the assassin who killed him would be wanted by the Empire and gain a bounty for his head. Thus, she shamelessly hired a bronze-grade hitman to kill him. But she miscalculated. Roy wasn't as weak as she thought. The assassin she hired could kill 1,000 people without breaking a sweat, but he was no match for a mythical body-tempering trainee. That dirty bitch, she is shrewd like a witch. Roy cursed Rose Charlotte loudly, turned to the silent assassin, and spoke. Do you have any proof of your deal with Rose? Swift Death replied, I do have one. It's. He lowered his head without completing the damn sentence. He got on Roy's nerves. Where is it? Roy asked the assassin gently. But he refused to speak. Ow. Swift Death's face was raised by a hand grabbing a handful of his long hair and giving it a harsh tug. Then, a pair of eyes that were running dry of patience as well as a life-reaping sword reflected in the assassin's eyes. Speak, this instant if you value your life. It's in my breast pocket. Roy's threat worked wonders, for the assassin yelped out just what he wanted to hear. Don't touch me. Swift Death yelled as Roy's hands went for his flat chest. Roy beamed at him disturbingly. Oh, I will be doing more than just touching. HYAA. Wow, what are you doing? Looting you. What are you, a thug? How can you compare the likes of this lord to a thug? I'm far worse, Roy proudly exclaimed. It was at this moment that the bashful assassin realized this man was unlike honorable knights and didn't mind being disturbingly shameless when dealing with the likes of him. Roy's hand wandered over his body. If he were a girl, this would be molesting. Thankfully, he wasn't. You sure have a lot of good things. Man, you made me rich in minutes, Roy said while looking at the assassin that was only left with white trousers and pants. Even his bronze-grade medallion wasn't spared. Roy was planning to pawn it to earn a few silver. Swift Death glared at Roy with a face as red as a ripe tomato. Maybe he was super angry. "You're shameless." Roy glared back and retorted, "And you squirm like a little girl when touched by a man." "Fuck you, I am a GI, Swift Death said under his breath. "What did you say?" Roy asked as he thought he heard something. Swift Death replied, "Nothing," then lowered his steaming head. The next instant, his chin was grabbed. Roy raised his gorgeous face. Their eyes met. And then, Swift Death heard a threat. "Tell me, now that you are no longer of use to me, should I dispose of you or spare you?" Roy asked the assassin, whose eyes wandered away. A thoughtful silence later, Swift Death gave him a reply. "Spare me. If you do, I will tell you the location of a noble regalia. You know how valuable they are. Obtaining it would definitely be helpful." Regalia was a fancy name used to describe runic items that were passed down from the older generation to the newer. A noble regalia was the main heirloom of a noble family. Roy didn't know what one was doing with a mere assassin. But, he didn't care. This was a lucky catch. He had to take it for himself. Swift Death didn't get a nod of agreement in return. He only saw Roy's hand going for his. Then, his wrist was grabbed and raised, showing the bracelet. Pointing at it, Roy teasingly said, "You mean this? Open hollow corner bracket magic nullifier, clear and protect the user from all debuff and curses. Negates information gauging. Conceal the user's gender, close hollow corner bracket. Open hollow corner bracket ding. Congratulations. Your perception skill has advanced to the second level. It's affected by your perception stat. You can now successfully inspect people 15 levels above you. Special techniques and items might cause it to fail. Close hollow corner bracket. Open hollow corner bracket perception level 2. Gain the target's stats and background, whether you know them or not. Close hollow corner bracket. With eyes widened in shock, Swift Death gaped at him. How did you find out?" "I have my ways. It's too good for you to keep." "So I will take it," Roy said as he yanked it off the assassin's arm. "No," the assassin yelled, but his resistance was futile. Roy took the bracelet off. Then he saw a scene that couldn't be unseen. This view was so magical that not only did his eyes widen, but his entire body also froze. The Adam apple of Swift Death vanished, giving rise to a swan-like neck, and this person's pretty eyes became crimson red, looking like mesmerizing rubies. The shape of the sharp eyes also changed. They now looked like peach blossoms, feminine but also seductive. One could lose themselves in those. Swift Death's cheeks gained a natural pink flush, and this person's chest that was as flat as a barren land without any crops suddenly grew 2 melons. The cool assassin Roy knew was no more. Kneeling before him, there was only an immobilized gorgeous maiden with fair and smooth skin that could be compared to a femme fatale. Her dazzling beauty stunned Roy to a state of stillness. Her big round eyes gleamed with anger, but they were so pretty that they only aroused pity in the man's heart. You're a girl," Roy exclaimed out of shock. "No," Swift Death yelled back. But Roy only heard a sweet and melodious sound of a girl coursing through his ears. "The cat is already out of the bag. Lady, there's no use denying," Roy said. The pretty assassin bit her lips. And so, Roy found out that the person he had beaten to a pulp, threatened multiple times, and touched all over wasn't a man but a woman who had disguised herself as one by using the noble regalia, magic nullifier. Leveling endlessly with the strongest system. Chapter 48, Power of the Level 2 Perception Skill is sick. "Sorry for just then," Roy said with a cough. The little assassin became flustered when she heard what he said. If he had just kept quiet and acted as if he hadn't done that to her, she wouldn't be red with embarrassment and anger. "You damn pervert," the little assassin gnashed her teeth at Roy. But HMPH. Roy felt wronged. "Hear me out. When I looted you like a bandit, I didn't know you were a gorgeous girl disguised as a man, all right? Otherwise, I would have still looted you like a gentleman. Why you, thug? In the face of Roy's shamelessness, Swift Death felt defeated. Wasn't it because of the magic nullifier that he failed to inspect her? Now that it was off, what would happen? Open hollow corner bracket. You've inspected Swift Death, close hollow corner bracket. As expected, two blue screens popped up in his vision. The first one contained her stats. Roy skipped that and moved to the second one. It contained her background story. Open hollow corner bracket. Swift Death's background, close hollow corner bracket. Open hollow corner bracket. Swift Death's childhood. Swift Death was an orphan wandering the cold streets with her sister. She and her twin sister were adopted by Weimar, the head of a small noble family. They thought that they were lucky to catch the eye of a noble. They thought they would be provided shelter against the cold and be fed well. Well, they thought wrong. They were mistreated and sold to an assassin organization for a few coins. The Yama's Gate used them for an experiment, hoping to create a deadly weapon. They were trapped in a dark underground dungeon with hundreds of other children with limited food and were forced to kill each other for survival. Close hollow corner bracket. Open hollow corner bracket. Swift Death's teen years. Years have passed since she first found herself trapped in the hellhole. Hundreds have died. She was 14 years old, but because of years of malnourishment and eating rotten food, she looked like a kid. The number of children had decreased to 40. She would have died, too, if not for her overprotective and sweet sister. She had yanked her away from the grasps of death many times. Close hollow corner bracket. Open hollow corner bracket. Swift Death's nightmarish days. One night, masked men descended into the underground dungeon to teach assassination techniques to the remaining 40. At first, they were met with resistance. But after they killed a few and broke the bones of the others, the children learned to behave in front of them. They trained and beat him every day until they lost all desire to go against them. Swift Death was worked to the bone every day. Snakes and all sorts of poisonous creatures were used by the masked men to induce poison resistance in the children. Those who failed to survive the bites died. This torture lasted for several years. Swift Death and her sister held on, hoping to one day take revenge. Out of the 40, 10 more died. The other became numb to pain, gained resistance to poison, and became fearful of the masked men. Open hollow corner bracket. Swift Death's luckiest day. The experimental area was invaded by a bald guy who called himself the Sun's third hidden blade. As he fought with the people running this experiment, Swift Death escaped the hellish place with her sister. Close hollow corner bracket. Open hollow corner bracket. Swift Death's new life with her sister. The twins became adventurers, using the viciousness and assassination techniques they had learned in the hellhole to hunt monsters. During one of their adventure, they found a testing ground and discovered 2 soul shards and awakening stones. Swift Death gained the teleportation skill and became the Dweller of the Night using them. Her sister gained a healing power and the Holy Priest class using the Soul Shard and the Awakening Stone, respectively. Not long after, the twin learned that the cause of their torment was selling a batch of children to the Yama's Gate. They launched an attack on him. Swift Death's twin died, taking Weimar and his knights down with her. The second her sister died, Swift Death vowed that she would destroy Yama's Gate. Swift Death killed the rest and escaped the place with the children, who had nowhere to go home. If left alone on the streets, they would become preyed upon. Thus, she became their pillar of support. Close hollow corner bracket. Open hollow corner bracket. Swift Death's life after the death of her sister. At the age of 18, she was forced to bear the burden of 25 children. She needed money to support them, so she became an assassin, doing dirty deeds for the Nether Gate. She was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. She was climbing up the ranks by completing missions and also earning money to keep the children well fed. Only through reaching higher ranks would she realize who was running the Yama's Gate, its inner working, and all its important executives. She planned to assassinate all of them. But she had a soft heart, and she had let go of 2 targets already and hence was punished twice. Close hollow corner bracket. Open hollow corner bracket. Swift Death's early 20s. At the age of 20, one of her adopted children became infected with a plague. She found out too late as it spread to the others. She urgently needs money to cure them. She found a good job, but her assassination failed as her target was too strong. Now, she has failed 3 times. She has to pay 10 times the job's reward for the fine, or the Nether Duke's shadows will get rid of her. On top of that, she needs 1,000 gold coins to cure the children, or they will die in 3 days. Close hollow corner bracket. The second level of perception was really something. Swift Death was stripped of all falsehood, her truth laying bare to Roy's eyes. He realized she wasn't irredeemable. She was not born pure evil. Circumstances forced her to commit evil. What are you going to do to me? Swift Death asked after a moment. She was unaware Roy knew her sad past. Roy smiled at her like a fat greedy merchant and spoke. Let's see, you're an assassin, a danger to society. You also tried to kill me. It's my duty as a noble not to let you roam the street freely. But killing you would be a waste. So I will have you make amends using your body. Immediately after, he was spat on the face by the assassin. You're disgusting, just like the other nobles. I did rather die than let you disgrace me. Have fun with my corpse. In all of the ways one could interpret Roy's words, she assumed the words. Unwilling to be disgraced by dirty noble, she tried to kill herself by biting her tongue off. Roy realized what she was going to do and immobilized her jaw. Swift Death immediately feared for the worse, but what she heard made her realize she had misunderstood him. Get your face straight, lady. Your head is full of shit, not mine. When did I say I was going to do that to you? I'm not asking you to prostitute yourself to me. You'll be working as my maid in the open and as my blade in the dark. I am demanding that from you. He freed her jaw after giving her a piece of his holy saint's mind. Leveling endlessly with the strongest system. Chapter 49, A New Maid. Ha! Swift Death's eyebrows jumped in surprise when she heard his words and realized he wasn't interested in her. She was indeed beautiful enough to arouse the lust of men, and Roy indeed wasn't immune to her charms, but he was a man from the modern world and had higher morals than the barbarians of the far west. So of course, he wasn't going to force himself on another, even if that person was a beauty as enchanting as a full moon. Roy scoffed at her. Ha, what? You are bluffing, right? The expression she saw on his face, however, said he wasn't thinking about pushing her down and seriously complimenting taking her in as his maid. I'm serious about it, Roy replied. Roy was no longer planning to kill her. Yes, he wanted to behead her before, but after realizing she wasn't innately evil like some psychopathic villains of this world, he changed his mind. Keeping her alive would be beneficial. There was a major villain who played a key part in causing the downfall of the Empire during the invasion of Chaos. This villain had assassinated the Great Sun. His assassination succeeded due to using the Soul Shard of teleportation. But this Soul Shard was currently in Swift Death's possession. Once a person dies, the Soul Shard they had merged with doesn't disappear. It randomly spawns somewhere in the world. Roy deducted that as long as this lass doesn't die at her intended time, the main villain, Teleporter, would never come into being. Thus, he settled on binding this girl to her side in order to create a future where Teleporter didn't exist. His plan wasn't without flaws, but it was better than killing the assassin. You must be crazy to think of keeping me, who tried to assassinate you, by your side. Are you not afraid that I will reap your life at night when you're sound asleep? Swift Death said to Roy sarcastically. Of course, I am. While saying this, Roy took out a rune stone the size of a goose egg. Its shine forced her to close her eyes. Then, she heard terrifying words coming out of Roy's mouth. I don't trust you in the slightest. That's why we will use this to establish an honest master and servant relationship. Swift Death felt bewildered by his words. She opened her eyes to look at the thing in his hand with fear and asked, what is this? A rune stone with multiple effects. Taming humans and beasts are one of them. But I can't do it without your consent. So we're back to square one. You have two choices. A. I kill you right here and now. B. You agree to become my maid and hidden sword. Choosing the second option is more beneficial as you will get the family asterisk and you'll never be touched without your permission. The final choice is yours. Decide. After saying that, Roy extended his hand toward her. A magical brand appeared on his hand, and the rune stone that was the size of a goose egg decreased to the size of a chicken egg. I accept. It was only after a while of thoughtful thinking that Swift Death grabbed his hand hesitantly. She didn't want to trust him, but what choice did she have? A symbol similar to the one on Roy's hand appeared on the side of her neck. It was shaped like a lightning bolt. Open hollow corner bracket ding. Congratulations. You've entered into a Master Knight contract with Swift Death. You may now create boundaries she absolutely can't cross with her consent. Close hollow corner bracket. How about setting me free? It's embarrassing to be trapped in this position, Swift Death said in a flustered tone. Roy declined her request. Not so fast. What is this pervert with a maid fetish planning to do by keeping me in this position? Swift Death cursed Roy in her mind while feeling gloomy. She was desperate for survival and thus sold herself to a noble. Now, she was regretting it. Roy looked at her with a stubborn gaze and said, You may not point your daggers at anyone without my permission. You may not try to harm your master and his people. You may relay all hot news spreading in the underworld to your world. You may heed the call of your master at any time of the day. Don't worry, I won't abuse you. Do you accept? If she didn't accept, he wouldn't free her. That's what she discerned from his stubborn look. What choice do I have? Yes, I do. Swift Death resigned to her fate with an aggrieved look. Thus, on top of having a cute maid with the potential of a mage, Roy also gained a deadly maid. It was time to leave. But they couldn't find it. Where's the exit out of this place? Swift Death asked. Roy found her feeling frustrated. Roy said, "That, I would also like to know." Swift Death looked at him with eyes wide open. She was trying to be scary, but it just made her look cute. Her red eyes were really pretty. You don't know. Roy really didn't. Unlike a dungeon where an exit would open after the boss monster was killed and the dungeon core destroyed, one had to find or create an exit in a testing ground like this one. Ah, well, maybe there's a portal here, too, like the one I found and activated after destroying the flower field. Let's search for it. What do you think? Roy replied while looking around. There were no magic symbols on the ground. He sighed, raising his head with a defeated look. Immediately, his expression changed. Swift Death, on the other hand, nodded and said, "This place is too big. We are better off searching individually. I will be investigating the corridors. You can try your luck here." She was about to head out when Roy stopped her and spoke. "No need. I found it." "Wah? Where?" "Up there." Roy pointed at the ceiling. Swift Death looked up. Intricate designs were drawn on the ceiling. Only after inspecting it did Roy find out that it was a magic symbol and their tickets out of this place. When both of their gazes landed on it, it lit up in bright gold light. Following that sight were words sounding in the boss room. "It's detected that you've fulfilled the conditions, slay 50 troglodytes in the grassland, and fish in troubled waters before coming here." Ha! Swift Death's eyes brightened in expectation. It looks like she has experienced a similar situation. "What is that voice?" Roy asked her. "We're going to get some kind of reward," she exclaimed contentedly. Leveling endlessly with the strongest system. Chapter 50, establishing a relationship with a fairy. It's detected that you've fulfilled the conditions, kill all the servants of the giant gremlin, and kill the giant gremlin, before finding the golden portal. You will be duly rewarded. The manager of this floor will now awaken from her slumber to reward you. The ceiling above their head opened up, revealing swirling darkness, out of which shot out a golden bubble. As it went down, it popped, revealing a fairy the size of a palm. Swift Death's eyes glinted with amazement at the sight of the fairy. It's really a fairy. The fairy had long silver hair, eyes, and eyelashes. Her wings were the size of a human finger, and they were of the same color as her eyes. Her ears were pointy, she was sleepy and grabbing a teddy bear in one hand. The fairy's ethereal cuteness awed the lass, overloading her brain, but not Roy. He was wary of her as he couldn't see through her. It meant that she was more than 15 levels above him and could possibly swat him to death. She rubbed her eyes with the back of her tiny hand before staring at Roy. "Are you the one who awakened me?" Roy humbly nodded toward the fairy. "Yes, I am. Before you reward me, mind telling me who you are?" She yawned, not even using her hand to block her mouth. "I'm a fairy created by the King of Wind." A prideful look appeared on her face as she said that. "Ah, so it's him," Roy said knowingly. He did know that the fairies had 4 kings. The most prideful and vain out of them all was the King of Wind. Unlike the wind, he wasn't carefree and liked to create a mess everywhere. If not for the other kings keeping him in check, he would be wanted throughout the far west. He was also a prodigy that loved to create trial grounds everywhere he passed through. The fairy sized him. "You know my king?" At her words, his mouth curved into a smile. The fish had taken the bait. "Yes, I know him. He's the most gracious, courageous, and handsome of the 4 fairy kings, right?" Roy praised the foolish king of fairies, sparing no effort. Fairies were simple creatures as per what he knew. They liked anyone who wished their creators well. He wanted to establish a good relationship with this fairy because being a friend of one meant being the friend of their entire race. Thus, he said what he just said. "You got that right." Joy flashed in the fairy's eyes, and she no longer looked at Roy like he was an idle passerby. His answer had satisfied her. Who wouldn't like to listen to a talented man praise their creator? He's undoubtedly the greatest king to exist in fairyland. Listening to her praising the King of Wind almost contorted Roy's face, but using 110% of his willpower, he kept the pleasant smile plastered on his face. Internally, he couldn't help but scream, "Ugh, what's wrong with you? How can you praise a fool as your greatest when you have got a mastermind that has protected your border for the past 100 years? How blind must you be not to see the difference between a jester and a king?" He didn't let his true thoughts show on his face as he feared that he would lose both the treasures he was to get and his life at the hand of this fairy. "I was tasked to manage this area. You're the first human since the creation of this land to reach here and fulfill all 4 conditions. Get ready to be handsomely rewarded." After saying that, the fairy stretched out her right hand, curling her finger into a fist. There was a ring on her middle finger. It shone, and a black hole the size of a meter opened up. Out of it rained out 10 freaking gold boxes. Thud, thud, thud. They landed next to Roy's feet with a dull thud. The impact caused their lid to open. A shine bursts out of the open treasuries, blinding the two mortals silly. Fuck, we've struck gold, Swift Death muttered, her heart jumping up and down in excitement and saliva flowing out her mouth in greed. She brought her face close to one of the treasuries, stuck out her nose, and sniffed. Damn right, this was the smell of gold. There were tens of thousands of gold coins held in each chest. It's not, we, but I. Her eyes bored into him pitifully. Sadly, her tricks weren't going to work on the man who just watched her sniff gold like a dog. He glared at her commandingly. The gold she had picked up was let go of, and she disappointedly backed away from the treasures. Sadness clouded her features as Roy helped her get her facts straight by stowing all the chest away in his subspace. Greedy bastard, she couldn't help but curse him. Roy ignored her scrunched-up face and went to have a talk with the fairy. There were some things only she could tell him, and believe it or not, he could tell she wanted to have a good talk with someone too. Are you here to talk? Yes, you guessed right. Then, let's talk over tea. I would love that. The fairy shared tea and biscuit with Roy while Swift Death sulked at the corner of the boss room. The fairy hadn't seen a soul in years, so she yapped at Roy quite a lot. Roy listened to her till the end while silently getting his answers from her. The fairyland was clean of the invasion of filth. One of the 4 kings, however, had gone missing. These pieces of information helped Roy confirm that the situation of the fairyland was as mentioned in the novel. Not a single thing was out of place. Here's a little something from me to you, the fairy said as she flicked her fingers towards him. A light manifested and shot out from the tip of her finger, entering Roy's body through his chest. Instantly, he felt warm and fuzzy, and the system's prompt appeared in his vision. Open hollow corner bracket ding. Congratulations. You've earned the goodwill of an elder wind fairy. You may enter and exit the fairyland of wind without a hic. The fairies of other tribes might see you in a better light than most humans at first sight. Close hollow corner bracket. Thank you. Open hollow corner bracket ding. Congratulations. You have gained the friendship of a fairy. Close hollow corner bracket. As a result of the short time they shared and Roy's humble, good, and grateful conduct with her, he gained her friendship. Open hollow corner bracket ding. Congratulations. The way out of the second testing has opened up. You may take it to return to the far west. Only after an hour did she open the golden portal. Goodbye, adventurer. The fairy waved them goodbye. Just before entering the portal, Roy turned around and said, "Thank you for housing us." While seeing his figure vanishing from her sight, the fairy shouted in a hurry, "You can't return here, but others can. Tell them about this place. They will surely come here in search of treasure. I will be waiting for them." The next moment, the golden portal teleported Roy and Swift Death to a wilderness 1,800 meters away from the county.